June 15, 1884. The sun was climbing toward noon when Bass Reeves and Deputy John Cantrell rode up to Jim Bywater's trading post near Sacred Heart Mission in the Potawatomi Nation. They'd been tracking Jim Webb for nearly a year, ever since he jumped bail and disappeared into the wilderness after killing Reverend William Stewart over a land dispute. Webb was a Texas cowboy-turned-killer, a ranch foreman who'd let power go to his head and bloodlust cloud his judgment. But Bass Reeves didn't care about Webb's history. He cared about the warrant folded in his vest pocket, and he cared about bringing Webb back to Fort Smith to face Judge Isaac Parker's justice. The year before, Bass had caught Webb the first time using nothing but his wits and a breakfast plate. He'd disguised himself as a traveling cowhand, walked right into the ranch house where Webb and his partner Frank Smith were eating, and watched them in the reflection of a mirror hanging on the wall. When the moment was right, Bass had spun around and grabbed Webb by the throat before either man could reach for their guns. Smith tried anyway, pulled his pistol, and fired wild. Bass put a bullet in him that would kill him days later from infection. Webb went to Fort Smith in chains, sat in Judge Parker's jail for a full year waiting trial. But his friends posted $17,000 in bail money, a fortune in those days. And Webb walked out of that courthouse, climbed on a horse, and rode straight back to Indian Territory. He never showed up for his trial. Now, a year later, Bass had found him again. Webb saw them coming and made a run for it, diving through a window and sprinting for the tree line where his horse was tethered. But Bass was faster. He spurred his big white stallion forward and cut off Webb's angle to the horse. The outlaw skidded to a stop, realized he was trapped, and made a decision that would seal his fate. Instead of surrendering, Jim Webb started running in the opposite direction, his boots kicking up dust as he put distance between himself and the lawman. 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards. Bass watched him go, sitting calm in his saddle. Cantrell was yelling something, probably asking if they should chase him down. But Bass wasn't listening. He was counting the distance, watching Webb stride, calculating wind and drop and the slight downward angle of the terrain. At 500 yards, Jim Webb stopped running. He turned around, raised his Winchester to his shoulder, and aimed at the lone figure on horseback silhouetted against the morning sky. The first shot sang through the air like an angry hornet. Bass felt the impact vibrate through his hat as the bullet punched a hole through the wide brim. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there like a statue carved from stone. Webb worked the lever action, chambered another round. The second shot was even more precise. It struck a brass button on Bass's coat and tore it clean off, the metal pinging away into the dirt. Still, Bass didn't move. The third shot cut his bridle reins in half, the leather straps falling useless against his horse's neck. The animal shifted nervously, but Bass steadied it with his knees, his hands free now, reaching for the Winchester rifle in his saddle scabbard. The fourth shot grazed his saddle horn, gouging a furrow in the leather. 4 shots. 4 near misses. Any one of them could have killed him, should have killed him. Jim Webb was one of the best marksmen in the territory. Everyone knew it. He'd killed men at half this distance without breaking a sweat. But something about Bass Reeves seemed to bend luck itself around him like a shield. Bass slid off his horse in one smooth motion, the Winchester coming up to his shoulder as his boots hit the ground. He steadied himself, took a breath, and looked down the barrel at the distant figure of Jim Webb. 500 yards was an impossible shot for most men. But Bass Reeves wasn't most men. He'd been shooting since he was a boy in Texas, had learned to hunt in the forests of Indian Territory during his years as a fugitive slave. He knew the language of wind and distance the way other men knew their prayers. He squeezed the trigger. The Winchester roared. 500 yards away, Jim Webb staggered backward, clutching his chest. Bass worked the lever, chambered another round, and fired again. The second bullet hit within half an inch of the first. Webb's knees buckled and he went down hard, the Winchester falling from his hands. By the time Bass and Cantrell reached him, Webb was on his back in the dust, blood spreading across his shirt in 2 dark circles. His breathing was ragged, each breath a struggle. But when he saw Bass standing over him, something like respect flickered in his dying eyes. Webb raised one trembling hand, and Bass took it. The outlaw's grip was weak, but his voice was clear. "You're a brave man, Bass Reeves," he said, the words coming slow and measured. "The bravest I ever saw." Then he did something that shocked both lawmen. With his free hand, Webb unstrapped his gun belt and held it up toward Bass. The leather was worn smooth from years of use. The holster custom made, the Colt .45 inside it, perfectly balanced. "Take it," Webb gasped. "My gun and holster. I want you to have them as a gift." Bass hesitated. Taking a dead man's weapon was one thing. Taking it as a gift from a killer was another. But Webb's eyes were insistent, urgent with the need to make this final gesture mean something. "I killed 11 men with this gun," Webb continued, his voice fading now, each word an effort. "4 of them right here in Indian Territory. You would have been the 12th, Bass. You should have been. I never missed from that distance, not once in my whole life. But I couldn't touch you." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Maybe that means something. Maybe God wanted you to have this gun instead of me." Bass took the gun belt, folded it carefully, and nodded once to the dying man. "I'll keep it," he said quietly. "And I'll remember you said I was brave. Coming from a man like you, that means something." Jim Webb smiled, actually smiled, and then his eyes went distant and empty as the life drained out of him. He died there in the Oklahoma dust, with his hand still in Bass Reeves's grip, the sun climbing higher overhead, the cicadas singing in the grass. Bass kept that gun for the rest of his life. When people asked him about it, and they did, constantly, he would tell them the story of Jim Webb, the outlaw who shot at him 4 times from 500 yards and missed every time. He'd show them the bullet hole in his hat, the place where the button had been torn from his coat. And he'd quote Webb's last words, "The bravest man I ever saw." But there was more to it than bravery. Years later, in 1907, when a newspaper reporter asked Bass about the most dangerous outlaws he'd ever faced, Bass didn't hesitate. "Jim Webb," he said, "shot him in 1884 near Sacred Heart Mission. He was the best marksman I ever went up against, and one of the bravest men I ever knew." It was a strange epitaph for a killer, brave and best marksman. But Bass Reeves understood something that most lawmen didn't. Courage wasn't the sole property of the righteous. Sometimes the men on the wrong side of the law had it in abundance. What mattered was what you did with it, how you spent that courage when the moment came. Jim Webb had spent his courage trying to kill a lawman from an impossible distance. Bass Reeves had spent his standing perfectly still while bullets sang past his head, waiting for the exact right moment to return fire. One man died. The other became a legend. The story of that 500-yard duel spread through Indian Territory like wildfire. Outlaws heard it in saloons and hideouts, around campfires and in darkened barns. The story of the lawman who couldn't be killed, who stood unmoved while Winchester rounds whipped past him, who then put 2 bullets in his target from a distance that should have made accuracy impossible. Some said Bass Reeves had supernatural protection. Others said he was the luckiest man alive. But the outlaws who heard the story understood the real message. You can't outrun Bass Reeves. You can't outshoot him. And if you try, you'll die with his name on your lips and your gun in his hands. Bass carried Jim Webb's Colt .45 for the rest of his career, 26 more years of chasing fugitives through the wildest territory in America. That gun saw action in dozens of arrests, was drawn in countless standoffs. But Bass never forgot the man who gave it to him, or the strange moment of connection between lawman and outlaw as one life ended and the other continued. Because in that final exchange, the gun belt passed from dying hands to living ones. The words of respect spoken across the divide between justice and lawlessness. Something profound had happened. Jim Webb had recognized in Bass Reeves a kind of purity of purpose, a commitment to duty that transcended the simple categories of good and evil. And Bass had recognized in Webb a fellow warrior, someone who understood the weight of the gun and the price of violence. When Bass Reeves died in 1910, Jim Webb's gun was still in his possession, carefully maintained and oiled, ready for action even though its owner had been dead for 26 years. The weapon was a reminder of the day when 4 bullets failed to find their mark, when perfect aim met perfect luck, when a killer's last act was to honor the man who killed him. 500 yards, 4 shots, 2 bullets in return, and a gift that would outlive both men, a testament to the strangest gunfight in the history of the Wild West.